The Rams have begun OTAs. We've got the top storylines that you need to know. That's coming up next here on Locked On Rams.
You are Locked On Rams, your daily Los Angeles Rams podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Ramley, and welcome to another episode of Locked On Rams, your daily podcast covering your Los Angeles Rams. Free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Locked On Rams, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're also available over on YouTube, so if you haven't yet, do us a huge favor and subscribe to the Locked On Rams YouTube channel. Join the party, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, hit that like button, getting so close to 13,000 subscribers. Also, which storyline for the Rams OTAs are you most looking forward to? My name is Doug McCain. You can follow me on X and Instagram at DMAC_LA. I've been covering LA sports for over a decade. SI 24/7 Sports, Dodgers Nation, Bleacher Report, and now the Rams for Locked On. And as always, I'm joined by the Rams pre-half and post-game show host for the Rams flagship radio station, ESPN 710 LA. He's entering his 9th season covering your Los Angeles Rams, the People's Champ, Mr. Travis Rogers. You can follow him on X at Travis Rogers. And on today's shows, the OTAs have begun for your Los Angeles Rams. We've got the storylines you need to be looking out for, you need to be following. And also, Jeff Fisher has a new job in football. We'll get into that. But first, this episode of Locked On Rams is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Okay, Travis, we're going to get into the OTAs in a second. But we got to talk about old friend, Mr. Jeff Fisher. He becomes the interim commissioner of the Arena Football League. He was serving as the president of football operations for the AFL's Nashville Cats, but he's taken over as the commissioner. So first, anytime you hear that name, it brings up some feelings, right? And I think when you look at Jeff Fisher's legacy, we'll talk about it a little bit. Yes, he's Mr. 7-9. And I think now every single team in the Arena Football League, I don't know if the math works out, every single team is going to go 7-9 in the entire league.
Well, the Arena League just kind of as a general entity feels like a 7-9 endeavor. It's not the worst thing ever, but it's also not anything close to what you actually want from a football league. So as a league, it feels very 7-9-y.
It does.
Jeff Fisher is a football lifer. There's a reason he was a head coach in the NFL for a million years. There's a reason that he's been involved with the USFL and the UFL and the AFL and every other L that there is to find around football. He's a very likable guy. Everybody that's ever met Jeff Fisher really likes him. And that, he knows ball. Do I want him coaching my NFL team? No. Do I need him to kind of steer the ship for an AFL that, I'll be honest, I barely even knew it was still solvent. So yeah, it feels about right.
Yeah, I think when you look at his legacy, too, I think people are so quick to forget that he took that team that was winning one game, that won 2 games, and brought them from a terrible team to a mediocre team. And mediocre won't get you anywhere, especially here in Los Angeles. But he did provide some stability for that move to LA. And I think there's a couple reasons. Like you mentioned before the show, great football guy, not great football coach. Also, a very well-liked guy, nice to everyone, great within that football complex. And also, I think, too, pre-social media. I think if it's kind of the social media era, I think it gets canned earlier, possibly. But still, I think, of course, you got the famous comment, right? We're not going 7-9. We don't want that 7-9 BS. He was right. They didn't go 7-9. They went 4-12.
4-12. It was, I say this all the time. It was an ugly 4-12 because that team started 3-1. That was a 3-1 team, and then they went 1-11 over the final 12 games of the season. It was a boring 4-12, and I think you bring it up that this was, Jeff Fisher's greatest crime is not that he was a terrible coach. He wasn't a great coach, but that his teams were really boring, that he brought a certain level of basic functionality and competency, but nothing beyond that, nothing innovated, extremely predictable, extremely boring, just kind of defensive slugfest that were not great for fans and did not lead to a ton of wins. But like you mentioned as well, to last 20 plus years as a head coach, there does need to be some competency in there. And the Rams were competent. They just weren't any good.
Yeah, exactly. That was the thing. I mean, you just can't be middle of the road. Pretty much in the NFL and especially in this city, especially after a
Yeah.
move. I think you mentioned the 3-1. That's where the excitement came from. You're like, wow, NFL, Los Angeles, this is really exciting. And then you just completely fell off. But he did give the keys to a pretty solid roster that had a foundation with Aaron Donald and Todd Gurley
Yeah.
to Sean McVay. And guess what? If he was a great coach, the Rams wouldn't have Sean McVay. He crawled so Sean McVay could sprint. So I think the Rams, they ended up in a good spot.
I never forget the first game, that the regular season game that the Rams had when they came back to LA. I was sitting in the Coliseum in the press box, and the game's winding down. And I'm going by memory here, so this might be a little bit off, but the final score was like 12-9 or 9-6 or 10-9. It was something like that. It was dreadful, just a dreadful football game. The Rams win the game, and I turned to Kirk Morris. I'm like, we waited 22 years for this to come back. Like this doesn't look good at all. And it wasn't. But like you said, it ultimately led to Sean McVay. So it all worked out.
Yeah, it really feels like a blast from the past. Just thinking about that whole era in the Coliseum and the old gold and navy jerseys. I remember I copped the Todd Gurley one. But hey, they ended up in the best football stadium in the planet, and they won a Super Bowl. So a lot has changed since then. But we're going to dive quickly into a storyline before we hit our first break that you need to be following during OTAs. And I think the first big one, honestly, Matthew Stafford. He already seen videos on social media of him participating, making throws, looking great. And this is someone that wants a new contract. He's making $40 million per year. Now the market has been reset. Elite quarterbacks are making $50+ million per year. He goes into this 2024 season with $31 million guaranteed, but nothing after that. So it's going to be really interesting to see if you get a new deal for Matthew Stafford, even a potential extension. Some in 3 years, 100 to 175 million. I mean, maybe that's even on the table. You just never know what they're going to do, and something going to be really following this OTAs.
Yeah, so here's what I know for sure. I don't know what the details of the contract are going to look like, but I know there's going to be one. There's no concern in my mind whatsoever that this is going to reach a point where they can't come to an agreement. That we've talked about this. The everydayers will know this. I've said this over and over. There are not more than 15 guys in the world that are good at this job. You have one. You know that you have one. He knows that he's one. That costs money. He's going to get what he needs. He's going to get what he wants, because the option of that is the opposite of that is you got to go find a new one. They're really hard to find. He's at OTAs, like you mentioned. This is what quarterbacks do. Quarterbacks don't really hold out. Quarterbacks don't really sit around. Quarterbacks don't do good. They come, they lead, they throw, they do the things that Matthew Stafford's doing. I have no concern whatsoever that Matthew Stafford will be a Rams quarterback for this upcoming season and for several seasons in the future, because they have one of the best ones, and you don't let those guys go away.
Yeah, and it really just shows the trust that Matthew Stafford has in this organization, that he's not fearing that, hey, maybe they're not going to do him right and get him a contract that he wants. Because if you look at next season, he has a $5 million roster bonus, a non-guaranteed salary of $27 million. If the Rams really wanted to move on from him, they could do it after this year. And if you're Matthew Stafford, I think you will want some more security and some stability. And I think they're going to find a common ground there, because you can't have an unhappy quarterback in your organization, especially someone who's won a Super Bowl for you.
And he's a pro, and he's been around the league a long time. He knows how the business of the league works. He knows that he can continue to prepare and continue to lead while his team, and by his team, I mean his team, his representation, the people that he's empowered and employed to go negotiate these things on his behalf. I would be shocked if this weren't taken care of sooner than later, and certainly by the start of the season.
Yeah, and Travis, I see people out there saying, oh, Matthew Stafford, he didn't help this organization with the restructure last season. Hey, guess what? You don't need the player's approval to restructure a contract. An organization can just do that, and they came to Matthew Stafford, and they wanted him to give some money back, okay? That wouldn't have sat well with any player in the Players Association. That wouldn't have sat well with Matthew Stafford. You would have been a step back for players in the NFL. So, yeah, it was kind of a very small storyline at the time in the grand scheme of things, but you can't do stuff like that, and I think with the year he had, they owe it to him.
Hey, I just want anybody listening to this podcast to think, if your boss came to you and said, hey, we're thinking about maybe giving you a little less than we previously agreed to. What do you think about that? No. No,
Exactly.
no,
No one's taking less money, man. You only
we
go forward, you
agreed.
don't go back. You know what I mean?
Exactly. We agreed for an amount. You agreed to it. I agreed to it. I'm getting that amount. I'm not getting less. We're not doing, oh, Tom Brady got taken care of. You know what I mean? Like the money will always be there. And I understand they make a lot, but they agreed to a number. He wanted the number. That's fine. I have absolutely no problem with that whatsoever.
I mean, O'Donnell only makes $2 million a year, so I'm just
Sure.
saying. But if he sells like 2 of his bobbleheads, he could probably make $50 million. Based on those they're hitting on eBay. But coming up next, we got more storylines to get into that you need to be following in the Rams OTA sessions. That's coming up next here on Locked On Rams.
The NFL schedule is out, right? Do you want to go see that game in San Francisco? Do you want to get on the road and go see him in New York and go see him play the Jets? This is where the Gametime app can come in and really make your day a whole heck of a lot easier. They've got killer last-minute deals on all of your NFL games, all in prices, views from your seat, and, of course, their lowest price guarantee. But you can't do any of it if you don't have the Gametime app on your phone. For home games, for road games, for whatever game it is that you want to see. Maybe you want to see a concert. Maybe you want to see a play. Gametime has you covered for all of this stuff. And if you're anything like me, sometimes you procrastinate to the last minute. Gametime is the best place for last minute deals. You can save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. So Gametime has you covered. You got to put the app on your phone. Take all the guesswork out of buying tickets with that Gametime app, right? Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed, and enjoy the game.
And we are off and running here on Locked On Rams. Thank you for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single weekday, free and available wherever you get your podcast. Locked On Rams, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Also, a special shout out to those everyday listeners out there watching and listening to every single episode of Locked On Rams. Can't thank you guys enough. And you can join that everyday listeners club too. All you got to do is watch and listen to every single episode, and then you won't miss a thing about your Los Angeles Rams. Again, membership is 100% free, so definitely join that Everydayers Club. All right, Travis, so picking up on storylines for OTAs, this is one that I know Rams fans are going to be extremely interested in, and that is the participation of Stetson Bennett. And I think what I'm looking for is that first Sean McVay update, that in-depth update on how he's performing, the thoughts on him, because, look, he missed an entire season. And there's a lot of questions because he landed on that non-football illness list last September. They never gave details on it, and they don't have to. But I think that is really something you want to see moving forward is he going to establish himself as that third quarterback? Because Jimmy Garoppolo is going to miss those first 2 games of the year, serving his suspension after he was found using PEDs.
Yeah, they're going to need somebody for a short period of time, and maybe it's Stetson Bennett, and maybe it's not. I think if Stetson Bennett were not selected where he was selected in the 2023 draft in the 4th round, then maybe the Rams had moved off from him by now. I think that it's not a high pick, but it's not necessarily a low pick either. You'd like to have your 4th round pick make your team and at least give him every opportunity to make the team, and maybe that's what this is. Maybe this is. You need arms in camp. You need guys that can throw. And maybe this is the last chance for him to kind of grab that position that maybe was handed to him a little bit early last year. I know that we thought that maybe he was going to be the backup, and then it obviously did not work out like that. Like you mentioned, he was away from the team for the vast majority of the time with really no indication on if, when, and how he may be finding his way back. He is back. I guess, wish him the best. You need as many players as you can. And, I think he's probably right on the edge of making this team or not. I think, like you mentioned, D-Mac, the Jimmy Garoppolo absence at the early part of the season probably benefits him, at least in the short term. But his future as a Rams quarterback, whether as a backup or as a future replacement, I think is very unlikely.
Yeah, I think it really comes down to, it's like if you're a shortstop, can you just make the routine plays right? Can you just be average, and they're going to give him a chance because they went out there and they solidified that backup spot. I mean, yes, Jimmy Garoppolo, he did get popped for performance-enhancing drugs, and the policy that the NFL has, he does have to serve a suspension. But I think for the Rams long-term, that is a massive upgrade against anything they've had in the last couple of seasons. So they're not really, if they get to Stetson Bennett after Jimmy Garoppolo, there's a real problem that they had.
No. If that happens, then look, I'm knocking on wood right now. You're dead in the water at that point. If you're down to QB number 3, unless it's super late in the season and you've already put some money in the bank, and maybe your other players, whether it's Stafford and or Garoppolo could come back in a relatively short period of time. Maybe you could get through a week or two, but no, this is a quarterback-driven league, not a backup quarterback-driven league, and certainly not a third-string quarterback-driven league. I love what they did with Jimmy G. I don't know. I'm probably the only Rams fan in the world that would watch him play in San Francisco and think that guy's pretty good. I know that the numbers weren't great. I know that Niner fans were frustrated with him. I know he lost his job to Mr. Irrelevant and all of these things, but every time he played against the Rams, he was pretty darn good. He made some pretty good decisions along the way. So having him here as your number 2 guy, I think is kind of the ideal backup quarterback situation. The guy that started a Super Bowl is your backup quarterback. That's not so bad.
Yeah, you look at Garoppolo last season. He only started 6 games for the Raiders. He went 3-3 in those games. He completed 65.1% of his passes, 7.1 yards per attempt. And just want to point out that the banned substance that he had, it was by the NFL said it was using a prescribed medication without having a valid therapeutic use exemption. So It's not like he was out there hitting 70,000 home runs like Barry Bonds and going to Balco. It's nothing kind of on that level. But any thoughts on just him getting popped for that? Does it mean anything to you?
I'm the wrong guy for this team. I don't care what anybody takes.
Okay,
I really do.
Yeah, I should. Yeah.
I don't care. I know that the NFL does. I know that Major League Baseball, I guess, pretends that they do. I don't care. Here's what I know for sure. They asked these guys to play at least 17 games, maybe more, to run in each other at incredibly high speeds and do things to their body that are unspeakably painful, and then turn around and do it again 6 days later. If they need to take something to make themselves feel better and protect themselves, I don't have a huge problem with it.
Okay. Well, thanks for joining us, Bud Selig. We have Bud Selig here in the Locked On.
Hey, I'm just telling you, I want to watch somebody run the 100 meters at the Olympics in 4 seconons. I want to see it. I want to see what happens.
Full-blown comic book characters, right? You want to make it mandatory.
Right? I want these guys to make their own informed decisions on what's best for them and their families while simultaneously entertaining me on Sunday afternoons.
Hey, I'm just saying, if Ohtani went to Balco, he'd hit 100 bombs easy by July. I mean,
right.
Let's be honest. But yeah, I think for these OTAs, I think it's at the end of the day, it's a really good story that Stetson Bennett has made it back, and you feel good about the progress that he's made. But like I said, I think Sean McVay and the things that he says about Bennett are going to be very, very telling and very meaningful. So we'll wait to hear those. But coming up next, some more storylines you need to be following. That's coming up next here on Locked On Rams.
It's winner take all time in the NBA, and it's winner take all time in the NHL. And FanDuel, there's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own, because right now, new customers, you get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. So, for instance, if you had taken the Edmonton Oilers last night in the NHL Western Conference semifinals, you'd have $150 in bonus bets to do with whatever you would like. You got $150 to bet on spreads. You got $150 to spend on money lines. You got $150 to spend on player props. And you got $150 to spend on any of the other things that you're going to find at FanDuel. Love the FanDuel PGA stuff. It's fantastic. Baseball day to day, awesome at FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon, LOCKEDON, and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook.
And welcome back to Locked On Rams. Thank you for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single weekday, free and available wherever you get your podcast. Locked On Rams, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, Travis, here in our third segment, we have more storylines that you need to be following during Rams OTAs, and I'm very excited about this one. And this one is, which rookies are going to step up? Are we going to have any rookie standouts? Which rookies are the players going to be talking about? Are the coaches going to be talking about? Because this time last year was when players started talking about Puka Nacua. Coaches started talking about Puka Nacua and how he went about his business and did things the right way and that he could have been an impact rookie. Well, are we going to see that this season? Guys like Jared Verse and Braden Fisk, I'm confident you're going to hear good things about them, but I'm talking about guys beneath that. I mean, going all the way to the Drake Stoops, to Kenny Logan Jr.'s, guys that are deep on the depth chart. And I'm just waiting to hear anything, any little nuggets about any of these rookies. I'm going to be all ears.
Josh Carty. That's what I want. I want to hear about how he's doing, about how he looks, about what the range is, more importantly, about what the accuracy is. I think this is the sneakiest pick that the Rams might have made. You know, obviously they picked in the first round for the first time in forever, but they drafted a kicker, and can that guy kind of hold down that position? I think will be really, really interesting. You mentioned it earlier when talking about Sean McVay and whether or not he talks about Stetson Bennett and kind of listening for some meaning inside there. I know I've said this before, but I think it's important to repeat it. Sean McVay will tell you who he thinks are the good ones, the special ones, the guys that not just might make the team, but the guys that might make an impact far sooner than you might imagine. I'll go back to when Cooper Kupp was drafted. Cooper Kupp, 3rd round, Eastern Washington, and they started raving about him right away. And then all of a sudden, halfway through his rookie season, the rest of the league caught on with like, hey, that guy's really, really good. Yeah, right. He said the same thing about Kyren Williams. And then when he got hurt, he kept telling everybody, don't forget about Kyren Williams. He's a real one. He's going to make an incredible impact on this team. And what do you know? Over 1,000 yards in fairly limited time last year, the first time he'd been healthy in the league. Same thing with Puka Nacua in camp. He doesn't say it about everybody. He's very selective about who he says it with. So if you see OTAs and he comes out and not just says their name, but really stops and pauses and says, I'm telling you, this guy has a chance to impact our football team in a very specific way, listen to him. He will tell you who he thinks is going to be an impact player.
I was just going to bring it up, Travis, that last season, every time he was asked about Cam Akers, it felt like he brought up Kyren Williams. Yep. And if you want to cut your way through that word salad, just listen to how he talks about players. I got A+ and AP Sean McVay. I'm fluent in Sean McVay. I know that you're as fluent as anyone in Sean McVay. And that really is the key right there. He says a lot of stuff, but sometimes he does break to the side and really go all in on a certain player. And I know he's going to do it this season because I think you're going to see not just the rookies, but the second-year guys, the Quentin Lakes, the Byron Youngs, the Kobe Turn. Just how is he talking about some of these guys? It's going to be extremely telling. It's going to be really fun to watch. And I think it's going to be one of the big reasons why this team has success or failure is the continued growth of some of these young players.
And keep in mind, you're going to want to listen for when he brings up somebody's name who he wasn't asked about. That's a big tell. Like if he's asked about Braden Fisk, right, or he's asked about Jared Verse, and he will talk about those two players. But if he throws in another name into that group, the whole, hey, and don't forget about this guy or this player or that player, pay attention because those are the ones that he kind of starts to tell you before it actually starts to happen. Like last year with Puka, it was, hey, Al Cooper Kupp, how does he look? It looks really good. Hey, Tutu Atwell, hey, yeah, he's good. You know, he's stretching the field. He's doing this, that. But don't forget about Puka Nacua. He's doing – all of a sudden it's like, who? What? The BYU? Okay. And then all of a sudden – games start, you're like, he did it again. He was telling us before we actually started to know. Listen to what he says.
And we'll see if this rookie class can be anywhere as good as last year's. This team's going to have a foundation. They're going to be good not just this year, but for years to come. But that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Rams. My name is Doug McCain. You can follow me on X and Instagram at DMAC_LA. And you can follow the People's Champ, Mr. Travis Rogers, at Travis Rogers. And until next time, whose house? It's Locked On Rams house.